Okay, there we go.
Uh,
So, thank you for joining us on our podcast,
Yes.
Raising Hell.
To heaven.
no, I appreciate you having me. I'm looking forward to
Uh,
the conversation.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I feel like the work that you teach, when I came across your page, I sent it to Chelsea straight away. And I was just like, this is the stuff we need to talk about because her and I are always speaking about this stuff, obviously from like the female perspective.
Mm,
So I mean, do you want to just give a little bit of background before we jump right in? Um,
sure.
Let our viewers know who you are.
Yeah. All right. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I do appreciate it. My name is Pete, and I'm 28 from Australia. And to touch on a few things, I guess, like my past and history, getting into the coaching space, I grew up going to church until I was about 18, 19. So I was heavily involved in, um, I'd say, the God space in that way. And I was put into positions of leadership in the ministry. And, when I was like 16 years old, I'd be getting up in front of hundreds of people to give messages and sermons and youth leadership and all that sort of stuff. So there was a part of me that was really dedicated to that space. But over time, I started to put pieces of the puzzle together, and I sort of found that what people were saying and what people were doing, there's a bit of a disconnect there. And for me, it was something that I was born into, and I just thought, that was what my life was going to entail moving forward. Um, and then I started to realize that it wasn't really coming from a place of truth and authenticity. I was just doing it because I felt like I had to. And growing up in that environment, there was a lot of pressure to be a certain way, to dress a certain way, to act, to talk, to be a certain like projection of yourself in order to fit in. So there was always that pressure going into my teenage years of just feeling like I just had to do the right thing. I couldn't make a mistake. I couldn't do anything wrong. So moving through my teenage years of doing that, growing up, I played like basketball. So I was always active, very competitive in that sort of domain as well, which was great. But I was still in that bubble, and I was speaking to things that I had no experience in, including like relationships and dating, and I wasn't even dating. Like there was just that sort of thing that I started to put together in my own life. It was like, I'm not living truthfully. Like I just don't feel like I'm speaking to what I should be speaking to. And I needed something to burst that bubble because it wasn't going to happen just by me stepping away from that and trying to find myself. So that catalyst came in the form of a woman. Met her, we got married young, trying to stick to doing the right thing in my eyes. From growing up and being conditioned in a certain way, I got married at 22, and I remember the feeling of standing at the end of the aisle, having absolutely no idea who I was. And throughout that process of meeting this woman, I started to live. I started to experience. I started going out, partying, drinking alcohol, having sex before marriage. It was all of the things that I was told not to do, essentially. So in that way, my whole identity that was wrapped up in church and in God and in servant like leadership in that space got swept out from under me. And
Wait, pause.
I
I just
had,
want to make sure I'm following correctly. So you
mhm.
went to the altar. So then how did you have sex before married if you were married?
What do you
You,
mean?
s- you
No,
said
so,
you
no, so that was beforehand. So okay. So I met, and we dated for 2 years before that. Then we got
okay.
married.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. I'm
So that
following
was
you.
the period beforehand.
Okay.
good,
Got you.
good
I'm
spot. I
like,
like that.
I'm like the math ain't math. Okay. Cool. Okay.
uh,
Continue.
and so, in that process of my identity being completely destroyed and having no idea who I was, there was a part of me that didn't know what to do. So the next best thing would be to put all my attention into the relationship, into this woman. So I really attached my worth to her. So my job basically was to fix all her problems and to serve her in that way. And that came at a cost. And I got to the point where I was just continually trying to fix so many different things that I felt like I was giving so much and I had nothing left. And I felt so empty. I hated myself. And I got to the point where I physically and verbally, I just couldn't say the words, I love you, without feeling like I was lying in my body. Like I felt so guilty every time I said that because I just hated myself. And we were together for 5 years, all up, married almost for 2. And in the end, we pulled the pin. It was the best decision for the both of us in that space, because the moment that I recognized that it was over in that area, like with that relationship, that was the first time in my life that I made a decision that was purely for myself. So amidst all the chaos and all the pain that took place in that relationship of me just completely abandoning myself, that was the catalyst that I needed to actually start the journey of that self-discovery. So from that point, it was basically, I ended that one, got into a rebound relationship, ended that rebound relationship because the same patterns kept coming out to play. Did the whole single life, dated around, all that sort of stuff, had fun. At the end of it, like, I knew that I had to really dive deep into what was present for me because I could see the same things happening over and over again. So from that point, I was like, okay, like, I know that I'm meant for more than this, and I know that this isn't me, and I'm really living out of alignment because I know that there is shit that I'm avoiding and it's really affecting me. So from that point, it was like, okay, I can either avoid it or I can lean in. So the lean in process looked like going to therapy and just talking for the first time about everything that was on my mind, because I was just so in my head. That was just me constantly, always looking for the threat, always trying to figure out what the other person's emotional state was like. So I had to adapt. It was the hyper awareness, like I was just trying to survive, and there was the pressure there, and I was always moving. I was never sitting still, couldn't relax. So just talking about what was present for me was the first step through therapy, which was fantastic. Like, I got really lucky to be able to work with a therapist that I found first up. Phenomenal. Like, we connected really well, and she was amazing at being able to, like, just pinpoint why I think the way that I do and why I act the way that I do. And it's okay to feel the way that I feel. Such a good start. And then from that journey of self-discovery, like, I learned how to sit with my emotions and to feel the pain. And I got coaches throughout the way as well, did some somatic breath work, and really worked to figure out, okay, why do I keep wanting to sabotage myself? Like, why do I feel like I just want to shut down every time someone asks me if I'm okay? Why do I feel like I want to cry, but I don't want to cry? Like, why do I feel like I really want to connect with this female, but there's part of me that's so scared to be vulnerable? Why do I want to be seen, yet reject the people that are around me? And it was just always that process of just coming back to that relationship that I had from childhood, of feeling all of that pressure to perform, to be something in order to receive the love and acceptance from the people that were around me. And every time that I have identified a certain pain point that's come out in my life, I can always trace it back to that little boy who was just so scared of just doing the wrong thing. He was so scared of just making a mistake, and he felt so, like, stressed and so much pressure to just be something in order to be loved. Like, he just wanted to be seen. That's all. And the more often that I did that, I started to realize that, okay, like, I'm not the only person that feels like this, surely. Like, I'm not the only one that's in this space where I'm in a relationship it's okay, but it could be better. It's kind of comfortable, maybe a little bit too comfortable. And I'm sort of just, like, existing. I'm not really living. Everything's sort of just, like, dull and a little bit numb. So there was all of that. And because of my personality as well, like, I think very deeply about things, and there's pros and cons to that, because I can always start to analyze things and overanalyze, and then you get the analysis by paralysis and all that fun stuff that goes on. But my job and responsibility when it came to really checking and healing those childhood wounds was to get out of my head and into my body. And I did that through training, like hitting the gym, working out, moving my body, like eating healthy, staying like energetically vibrant. And I did that like through meditation, through breath work, to be able to actually sit with and be with the emotions that I feel around the pain that I went through. And I found that my work today, like working with men, there is a disconnect between the pain that they've experienced and what's actually coming out to play today, because there's that story in that gap. And that's what I work with men to actually start to dive into. It's like, okay, what's the story you're telling yourself? For me, it's like, I'm just not good enough. Like every time I try and do something, it just doesn't work. Like, what's the point? Why should I try? And that held me back from so much. So throughout my life, like there was no one instance where I was like, okay, I'm going to be a coach. And then it was just like, it started to happen. It was like, no, there was repeated times where I'd be in relationship and just that wasn't serving me. I'd be so disconnected because I was disconnected from myself. Like I was unhappy because there was parts of me that I was just pushing away. And I felt like the people that are around me weren't seeing me. And the reason being is because there was parts of myself that I refused to look at. It always came back to me. And it's the same deal today. Like even today, like I did some breath work because I'm at a point in my life where there is a story that I've held on to from my marriage 5 years ago that I've adopted as part of my identity that I can feel so much resistance to, that I want to hold on to that story just because it makes me feel like I'm right. And it serves me because it's safe, it's comfortable, but it's no longer serving me for where I'm at in my life right now. So today, I actually had to breathe into that because my body is feeling so exhausted and I'm so angry and I have all these emotions inside that it's just unprocessed trauma that I adopted a story around in order to cope with the pain that I went through long ago. So even like it always comes back to me, like even today, like it's the same deal. It's like, what am I going to do? Like when I can create a story around the pain that I've been through that's not true, cool. I've lived 5 years living a lie. Now I also have the power, if I can live a lie, I can also live in truth. And it goes on both ends. And that's what I think a lot of people, they forget. Like we can curate our own lives in a way that's just like so incredibly powerful that we don't realize what we're capable of. And if this is what I speak to with guys as well, it's like if you can tell yourself and put so much energy into maintaining your belief system around a lie, then you can put it around a truth. Like you are disciplined, bro. Like you've got what it takes. You have the grit because there's so many blessings and so much beauty around you that you're just not seeing because you refuse to. That takes some diligence. And it's not that people are lazy and undisciplined or they're just like they don't want to change. They're just focused on the wrong area and they're trying to stay in that bubble of safety. Now for me, like the biggest phases of growth in my life have always come at the end of tragedy. And I say tragedy in quotes, like heartbreak, because it's all about the heart. Like it's the heart matters, and that's what gets to the real cause of this. It's not like a problem you can solve in your head, or it's an identity shift where I feel like I am living in a way that's no longer serving me for the time and the space that I'm in now. And on the other side of all those painful emotions is my truth. That's where it comes from. So it's like a repeated pattern that I've seen in my life as I go through the different seasons of life where things will settle for a while and then it's, all right, cool, we're going through a grieving phase around 40, whatever it is, but we're here. And I think to be able to show up for that each time, that's the key, to be able to lean in and manage the story that you tell yourself around what you're actually experiencing. So long-winded, but yeah, that's sort of my story leading up to this point where I'm helping men to be able to lean in to the pain that they're feeling. And sometimes like the amount of conversations I've had from guys and also women like reaching out for their man as well, it's truly heartbreaking, some of the stuff that you hear, and you guys would know, like being in that space as well. It's like, man, some stories like you honestly don't know how some people survive, but there is a reason that we behave the way that we do. There's a reason that our life is going down the road that it's going down, and we are the determining factor in all of that. And it is true. Like, I can say from my own experience that the life that I'm living, the people in my life and the experiences that I went through, they were a direct representation of my own worth and what I thought that I deserved. Every relationship, every argument, every like self-sabotaging technique that you can use, that is a direct representation of what I think that I deserve.
Both of us can resonate with that.
So it's just, you know, from the man's side of things, it's like, it's our responsibility to really show up for that, because, you know, being in the position that we're in, like, we're called to be leaders. You know, we're called to be able to set the tone of the relationship. We're called to be able to be masculine, not in an aggressive way, although that requires it sometimes, but to be grounded enough to be able to hold space for the emotions that we feel, and still fulfill the responsibilities that we have. And that wounded boy in me, for so long, it was just like, as soon as something difficult came up, I would just retreat. I would just hide behind my pain. I would have a pity party. I'd be in the corner and just crying, feeling bad for myself, and unable to actually show up and hold space, because now I was no longer working the problem was working me. So being able to get to that point where I can help other guys as well, to be able to be in that place is like, cool, you got a lot of shit going on. Like, there is some real trauma here, man. But you've got a woman who wants you to be able to live truthfully and honestly, but she also needs to be safe enough to be able to help you too. And because it no longer affects just him, like, it's her as well. And this is where the partnership comes into it. There is like 90%, you know, I can just throw numbers around, but high majority of the men that I speak to, they're either in a relationship or they're just getting out of a relationship. It's always the case. And there's a reason for that, because as guys, when we're single, we can really hide behind competency and getting shit done and working really hard and training really hard, getting a good body, all of that. But we have no mirror. We've got nothing that shows us the areas that we're not free in.
Oh, I love that.
And I think a lot of guys, they hide behind that even when they get into a relationship. So when they see something that they don't like about themselves or in their partner, that's a reflection of themselves. And this is where they're taking that energy of like, no, like, when I was on my own, it was so much easier. Yes, of course it was easier, because you didn't have anyone to actually show you the areas that you refuse to look at. So when I've been in those spaces where I was like, whoa, okay, I am terrified of being vulnerable, because I've been betrayed and I've been hurt so many times. I actually don't want to tell you how I feel. Can you stop asking? Or take a breath. Okay, I actually don't want to tell you how I feel, because I'm scared and I don't really want you to see me. So I'm going to say how I feel, and it's probably going to feel really weird. And it's just going down that path where you have the difficult conversations. You have the awkward sort of silences, and you go back and forth, and it's like, all right, cool. Are you going to leave? It's all of that. Like, there's nothing pretty about it. But we get this notion that guys need to be the man, to be masculine, to show up. Part of showing up is to look like an absolute idiot in front of your partner. Part of showing up is being able to cry. Part of showing up is being able to express that, you know what? Like, I actually don't want to sleep with you tonight, even though stereotypically guys are just supposed to be sleeping left, right, and center and have a high sex drive and all this sort of stuff. There's other stuff that's going on. Like, wherever you're at, your ability to own that and speak your truth is dependent on the level of depth that you're willing to go within yourself to be able to speak that forward. And every time that I've been able to do that, my partner has respected me and loved me so much more for it. And it's the same deal, like the token from the relationship that I have with myself. Like, every single time I've spoken my truth, I trust myself that little bit more. And that's the work. And if you'll notice, like, on my posts as well, it's the same thing that I say, just in different ways. And at the end of most of my posts, it's just like, this man needs to identify how the pain's playing out, feel into the emotions that are around that pain, find his truth. What's actually true? Am I really not good enough? you know, if I tell the truth, is she really going to leave? Do I really have to prove myself to this person? Is it really always going to end up me being alone with no one that cares about me? Like, is that true? Am I really not worth it? Once you can actually feel into your truth, and we do that like through the breath. It was like not just in your head. It's like, oh no, I know that I'm worth it. It's like, no, you feel that you are worth it, and you can walk through life with that knowing, that deep knowing. And then from there, it's being able to live in integrity and alignment with what you actually value. Because in a lot of cases, it's just guys are living outside and there's that disconnect of what they value in themselves, and they don't have anything that's actually leading them. They're just going left, right, and center, trying to please the people that they're with, trying to please everyone else around them. They're looking to external things for validation, trying to find their worth. But the problem with that is everything around them changes. And trying to be grounded by looking elsewhere and outside of yourself, it just doesn't work. So that relationship, it always comes back to that little boy, like every time, every time. And whilst there's things that you can look at presently in my work with how their pain's playing out for men, we always track it back to that little boy who just wants to be seen, just wants to be safe, wants to be held, to know that he's okay, just as he is, you know? So, yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. That was amazing. First
That
of
was
all,
a lot, eh?
that was so good. Like, I was like, where's my pen and pencil? Like, so good. Thankfully, we recorded it, so we did take notes. But one thing I have a question about is, how would you say you would identify, because like you were saying, we build a story around a lie, right? So how do you identify what's a lie and what's actually, like, when it is that fake lie story that we're building around something deeper, or when that story is actually true?
Yeah. So that process comes down to feeling the emotions first and foremost, because that's a lot of the time what clouds it. I say for guys, you know, because I work with men, but for myself, like that's what clouded it for me. So when I felt the anxiety, when I felt the pain, when I felt the anger come up, it was the same emotions that I had when I was in that place where I was always giving and getting nothing in return, and always trying to please the people around me. So when I dropped into that space through breath and felt it in my body of just the real sadness and real grief around that, suddenly everything settled. And it's like, I actually don't need to prove myself anymore. But because there's so much emotion that's built up around that for guys, when we just disconnect from those experiences and keep living our life, our body's just like, all right, well, we're still trying to survive, and yet we've got a really good partner and 3 kids as well. You need to watch out. You need to be careful. So we're still getting triggered by the same things. Yeah. For me, my process of doing that is to be able to breathe into that and feel it into your body. So create the space for it. And once you can actually feel into the emotions around it, you start to see the truth come out. And this is where, when we're in that place, for guys asking, like, oh, what's true? Like, do you really believe that you're not enough? And every time it's just like, no, I don't. So being able to get to that point where we can feel and create that safety in our own body to be able to give ourselves the permission to lean into that, that's where that truth starts to come out. And that's where we start to discover the truth. And that's when we can let go of the old story, because it's no longer attached to the emotions that come up anymore. So when the wounds do appear in the present day, it's like, okay, there's that the familiar feeling of anxiety. All right, sweet. I know I don't have to be anxious right now. However, we're going to lean into it. We're going to feel it. I know this isn't a representation of my own worth, and I don't actually have to hold on to this anymore. Having that awareness, because you've actually sat with the emotions around it, that's the game changer. So that's the part where I'd say, it's in answer to your question, being able to feel the emotions around that, because the story comes from the pain that we've experienced has been too much, so we have to make sense of it. And that's what we do as children as well, right? Because children are narcissistic when they are children, in the best way. So it goes on both ends. When you tell a child, hey, you did such a good job in that game, you must have trained really hard, you did really well, I'm really proud of you. And they're like, yeah, thanks, Dad. they actually believe it. But then it's like, hey, Dad, can we go and shoot hoops? No, I'm busy. Oh, okay. Well, okay. And then it's just like, okay, well, I mustn't be good enough because Dad's working and he's not seeing me. So they take both instances and take it on as themselves. Like, it must be my fault. And so many of the conversations I have with guys, it's just like, yeah, Dad left the house, never came back. Or I grew up with Dad, same as my experience as well. I grew up with a dad in the same house. Yeah, I felt so far away from him. So for me, that was just like, well, he's obviously not trying to connect with me, so there must be something wrong with me. And in that pain, that's where the story starts to come out. And that can happen when you're a child. That can happen when if it's too painful, when we are adults as well. It's the same deal. Like, we create the story. So being able to go back, feel the experience and the emotions that we're holding on to around it, that's when we start to actually discover the truth. And people have that same question. It's like, what does finding your truth actually mean? Because it was a buzzword, like live your truth. Like, it was a slogan for so many people. It was great. But it's like, what does that actually mean? Well, it means getting underneath the pain. It means figuring out what's actually real. And the truth is always on the underside of the lie that we tell. So in order to figure out what the lie is, you've got to be able to feel. And that feeling is it's scary, especially when we go through those things. It's just like, man, I get it. Like, I get it. You want to avoid that 100%. And some of the conversations, like, I walk away from them almost in tears because of what these men have been through. And to be able to actually provide the support for that, it's just like, dude, I get it. I get that everything in you wants to avoid it. I get that everything in you wants to just bury that and keep it there forever. But it's no longer serving you, and you're going to suffer for it. So the bravery for these guys that actually do this work and lean into that space to be able to find their truth is hats off to them. It's incredible.
Yeah, dope. Yeah, big time. Whenever I get guys coming to us that are willing to talk about and share where they're coming from, and already just to a stranger even be like, I'm hurting and I'm feeling these emotions and this happened, I'm like, you are so brave for coming to me and telling me this. Like, you already did the hardest part right there. So much respect. So
100%.
Sure, you see that times like a million.
Yeah.
But I think that's the biggest thing, you know, with this whole, with the fear, it's such a driving force in all of us. And, you know, it obviously stems from that fear of rejection, that fear of, if I share this, then like, I'm not going to be enough. And I'm such an advocate of, so firstly, I coach breath work as well, but it's like what I work with when I work with people, because I find when you get people into a breath work class, and I've seen it so many times, the masks come off, everything comes off, and you're opened to this truth in you, to this vulnerability. And it's so inspiring to see people be able to reach in and touch that part of themselves, to be able to move beyond the fear and to start speaking about it, because, you know, it's also like what's underneath the pain is the fear. But I think, you know, our pain is actually a doorway. And when we can, and this is a big thing for me, is when we're able to reframe, and it's what I've been doing so much in my own life, is taking your story back and constantly coming back to, this is happening for me, not to me. Because I used to do to me all the time, and I realized I was just in the space of being a victim. And I see it a lot with, who are we speaking to? I was speaking to someone, and they were just like, similar story to you about like blaming God. But it has nothing to do with that. Like, blame is so useless here in this work. And I think if we can just get people out of that space and into this empowered space of thinking of, this is happening for me, it is scary, it's uncomfortable to go to that place, but the pain that you will experience in the discomfort of staying here and trying to hide all of this actually is so much worse. And I love what you said at the beginning about how, what did you say? You said about how, oh yeah, it takes complete discipline to live a lie. to keep telling yourself you can't do something. So we are so capable, like, of creating a life beyond our wildest dreams. And all it takes, I've found, is people just want connection, that love through connection, and to be heard. And I feel like when you offer that space, when you go, I'm still here, like, I'm still here, there's nothing you can say that's going to scare me away. I think it's such a beautiful thing to be able to offer that. But then here comes my question is, how do we keep providing the space? Because there's so many people who are struggling with this in relationships. Like, how do we consciously relate? How do we show up and be the mirror? Because as you said, a relationship is so much harder than being single. When all that fear comes up, when all that trauma comes up, instead of running, just coming back to pause, breathe, and then noticing what the mirror is. Because I feel like there is such a need for that right now. People don't know where to turn. People don't know, like, who to ask. This is why, like, the work that you're doing is so great. The work that we're doing is so great. People have forgotten how to communicate. So it's like, how do we provide that platform?
Right. It's like generations not teaching the youth how to communicate, because like you said, especially with men, shut up, deal with it, shake it off. Man doesn't encourage communication.
Yeah. It's an interesting topic, because it can go down so many different rabbit holes with that, because you get people who actively shut down the expression of a man when, as soon as they express how they feel, they're being a little bitch. And for so many men, they do experience that, where they've been really shamed for the expression. And with that, though, like, I would say, like, the ability for a man to hold space for himself, that's life altering in a sense. And on the same token, a man who is really emotional in that sense as well, who's driven by his emotions, is very dangerous. And to some degree, like, we all need that level of emotional, let's say intelligence, not even, but the ability to maintain emotional integrity. Because if we were so driven by our emotions, most of us would have killed someone already. Most of us would be in prison, for men anyway, because we are so driven by our emotions and we feel things so strongly. And so, okay, cool. Like, we do have that aggressive nature in us. Like, we are wired like that. Like, you go up to a guy and you look him face on, not off to the side, but feet directly facing him. There is this feeling that rises up in a man. It's just like, okay, we're about to fight. But the only thing that's stopping us from doing that is our social adaptation. Like, okay, well, if we disagree about something, well, are we going to be civil about it? Or the next step is we're going to fight. Like, there's always that presence there. So we're supposed to be able to harness that. We're supposed to be able to be dangerous. We're supposed to be able to be very competent physically to be able to defend ourselves and the people that we love. With that, though, we need to be able to channel that. And this is where, like, in answer to your questions, like, we need the conversations around how to do that. And in a world where there is so much connection, there is so much disconnection as well. And for so many guys, like, they will start to gravitate to a friend group, I would say, and other men who hold the same values as them, which is good and bad, because whilst you're avoiding your own pain and you can talk shit about your partner, you're going to find other guys who are doing the same thing. And we always gravitate in the same circle that we feel most comfortable in. It's the same with relationships. It's the same with friendships. It's the same with the accounts that we follow on our Instagrams. Like, there is always these tendencies to reaffirm the beliefs that we hold.
Yeah.
But there's parts and little snippets, little moments where it's just like, oh, that really resonates with me. I kind of like what he said about that. I kind of like how he phrased that, like, to be able to be grounded and hold space for yourself. There's those little pockets where it's like, there's something else that's present for me. Being able to tap into that. That only happens when we, like as a collective, have more conversations around that to be able to hold space for it. And the amount of times that like I've jumped on calls with people with no intention to bring them on as a client, with no intention to make a sale. I'm like, dude, just jump on the call. And they're like, no, I'm not in a position to pay for anything. Like, I don't actually care. Jump on because I want to talk with you because your problem to me is interesting and see what I can actually walk away with. And there's a clear distinction between them jumping on the call and then them jumping off the calls. Like there is so much that they've just expressed to me. I'm like, cool, why don't you look at it like this way? And like, thank you so much. I'm like, dude, like you need to get around more people that actually support you. You can